We've got a big week coming up in fantasy football, and our fantasy running backs are the only ones who are relatively healthy and giving us serious production, so it's time to lock in. All I ask is that you go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So going down to our first tier right here, we've got Derrick Henry at number 1. This guy just continues to amaze me. This is a player who is uniquely built to handle this heavy of a workload. And the reality is, he's just breaking off big runs. So every time I think he's going to lose volume and lose fantasy upside as a result, he just breaks off another 80-yard run. This dude is doing it against everybody. So against the Cleveland Browns this week, who have actually been better defensively, I don't think it really matters. Joe Mixon and Kenneth Walker at 2 and 3 to round out the top tier. These are my guys that I think are in good positions this week, and they're also just doing fantastic work in fantasy. With Joe Mixon here, this dude has been phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Taking on the Indianapolis Colts this week in Houston, I think Houston's going to come into this game in a really, really bad mood. They just lost a really close game to the Green Bay Packers, and Joe Mixon is playing out of his mind right now. So they're going to continue to feed him as this offense continues to struggle a little bit to get some real passing upside. And then Kenneth Walker versus the Bills here. I love the matchup here. The Buffalo Bills are particularly susceptible to the running back position in fantasy football. And again, every week, Kenneth Walker, regardless of how many carries he has and what his yards per carry are and how many targets he has, this dude is finding a way to be fantasy excellent. Not just relevant, excellent in fantasy football. So I don't think it stops this week against the Buffalo Bills. I love him this week. Dropping down to our next tier right here, we've got Kyren Williams at number 4 and Breece Hall at number 5. Now, these two guys right here, I think they've also been fantastic, especially over the last 2 weeks or so. And Kyren Williams particularly, this guy has never been more important to this team. Honestly, I think they're going to get Cooper Kupp back this week if they don't trade him before the actual game on Thursday versus the Minnesota Vikings. But either way, Kyren Williams, he's just been too important to this offense for him to all of a sudden just lose importance in this important game versus the Minnesota Vikings here. Are they actually going to try to do something, or are they going to start to tank? We'll see. But regardless, Kyren Williams is still a top tier back in fantasy. And then with Breece Hall at the New England Patriots this week, I think it's also a fantastic matchup for Breece. And one thing has become super, super clear over the last 2 weeks without Nathaniel Hackett calling plays and now with Todd Downing calling plays. Number one is that Breece Hall is the unquestioned number 1 in this backfield. Now, there is an issue here, is that he has not looked particularly great on the ground this year, but it doesn't really matter when he's getting tons of receptions, and this guy is super, super good through the air. So regardless of how they get him touches, Breece Hall is so important in this offense. He's a top 5 back this week against the New England Patriots. And then rounding out this tier at 6, Saquon Barkley. If you want to put him above Breece Hall, I've got no problem with it. He's got a good matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's in Cincinnati here. When you actually look at Saquon Barkley on the entire season, he's actually been a little bit hot and cold. He's a streaky player so far this year. It's not that I don't think he's going to be great. He's in tier 2 here because I know he's going to be excellent. But with Saquon Barkley, there are games where he just has some unexplainable down weeks, and I think that I have to factor that in to every single week as I rank Saquon Barkley. That's why he's at here at number 6 for me. Dropping down to our next tier right here, Jordan Mason at number 7 and Aaron Jones at number 8. Jordan Mason, I think, is a particularly excellent play this week. Just think about what the 49ers are going through right now. Number 1, they've lost everybody on the, everywhere, not just receivers. Brandon Ayuk is obviously down. Deebo Samuel, I think he's still in the hospital. Obviously, Jordan Mason has been filling the void for an injured Christian McCaffrey. This team is so desperate for any playmaker they can get. And if you just take out what happened in Kansas City has done that to a lot of running backs this year. Mason's been fantastic. At home versus the Cowboys here, I think this is an excellent matchup. You do not sit Jordan Mason this week. And Aaron Jones at number 8. I think Aaron Jones at the Los Angeles Rams on Thursday night, as long as he can play, this is going to be a great matchup for him. The Rams are a particularly weaker defense, I would say. And Aaron Jones, of course, is questionable. He's now dealing with a hamstring injury, I see. But as long as he plays, Aaron Jones is going to continue to rip off big plays because he plays for an excellent offense. This offense is rolling over everybody. Even in a competitive game versus Detroit, they were moving the ball at will. So Aaron Jones, again, I think has another great matchup, another great situation on a great offense. I want him again. And then Jahmyr Gibbs at number 9 to round this tier out. Versus the Tennessee Titans, this matchup is fantastic. If he was alone, obviously he'd be in the top 5 for me personally. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously you have to factor in David Montgomery. He's going to play this week by all accounts. They're not worried about that knee injury. We'll get into him here in a little bit. But Jahmyr Gibbs is my personal favorite Detroit running back this week for the second straight week. And the reason is because even though David Montgomery is going to play by all accounts, what are the chances he's like fully healthy? It's not like this injury just all of a sudden went away and we didn't see him limp off the field. Like, he limped off the field for a freaking reason. That guy is not 100%. So Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, just has another massive game versus the Tennessee Titans, man. This matchup is so fantastic. Dropping down to our next tier right here, Kareem Hunt at number 10 and Bijan Robinson at number 11. Listen, it's just time for people to give Kareem Hunt his due. This dude is handling everything in this backfield, and he's been really good doing it. Like, against a tougher San Fran defense last week, he put up 2 touchdowns in that game, and he handled 20 carries. They need him. They need him 100%. The receivers are totally depleted, and he's the only actual competent running back in this backfield. And he plays for the Chiefs, and they take on the Raiders. Like, everything lines up. People just need to understand, Kareem Hunt doesn't leave your lineup at this point. This guy is a starting running back every single week, regardless of what the opponent is, but especially this week, the Raiders are particularly strong. Bijan Robinson at number 11. I know I'm going to get flack for this. I probably continue to have him lower ranked than I should, actually. I just, for some reason, can't wrap my arms around Bijan yet. At the Tampa Bay Bucks this week, it's actually a really good matchup that I really trust for Bijan. There's an element to it where it's like, okay, what week do they reinsert Tyler Algier as like a 60-40 split between Bijan and Tyler Algier? I just can't get that out of my mind with Bijan Robinson. These 2 games, like, they're very rare. We haven't seen it yet this year from Bijan, so I'm struggling to adjust, I think. To be completely transparent with everybody, I still have my issues with Bijan Robinson in particular, but obviously I acknowledge he's a great running back in fantasy right now, so you continue to ride the wave with him. 12 and 13, James Cook and Jonathan Taylor. James Cook at the Seattle Seahawks this week. I'm totally on board with playing James Cook. I called him a buy low trade target in advance for this week, and it totally coincides with what I think is going to happen this week. I think that he's going to crush the Seattle Seahawks. I think this is a great matchup for him. Bijan just tore them up in a loss, a clear loss last week, and I think that Buffalo is going to maintain this game and be able to use James Cook a lot. I'm not worried about James Cook and his lack of involvement in some weeks. I think that's to keep James Cook fresh for a playoff run. I think there's going to be games where James Cook has massive weeks, and I think this could definitely be a game. Jonathan Taylor at number 13. I'm including him because there's optimism, apparently, from Shane Steichen, the head coach, that he comes back this week. Wouldn't that be a dream for all of us? If we can get Jonathan Taylor back this week, that would be fantastic because he's been absent the past 3 games, and this offense misses him dearly, and we miss him dearly in fantasy. At the Houston Texans, the matchup is not particularly ideal, but it definitely is a playable matchup. And Jonathan Taylor has been awesome. Like, those games where he played this year, he's been pretty awesome, man. Especially those last 2 weeks of him playing. So the minute he comes back, he goes right back into your lineup. I think it could be this week. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But obviously, if he doesn't go, every other Colts running back is much lower down this list. David Montgomery at 14 around this tier out. Don't take it as a slight to David Montgomery. I love Montgomery. I've had him ranked like top 12 all year. This guy has been fantastic here. Last week I predicted a bad week. Didn't predict the injury, but he came back, still wasn't very good. That could be for one of 2 reasons. Take your pick. Number 1, the matchup just wasn't very good for him, which I said it wasn't. And number 2, maybe he's just fully not healthy. Either way, if he's not fully healthy this week, that's going to be bad for him. I don't think that he is fully healthy, to be honest with you. So versus the Tennessee Titans, like I said earlier, I just clearly prefer Jahmyr Gibbs in this matchup versus the Titans because I think that Montgomery, there's just no way that he's 100% this week. But obviously, still a great matchup here and still a great fantasy back. And I'll tell you what else is great. Matt Stafford's projection on underdog this week is 0.5 total yards. Take advantage of the sweat-free projection this week. Go down in the comments, grab the link that's there, use code FN to sign up for Underdog. They'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 bonus cash, and that only happens if you take advantage of this Matt Stafford sweat-free projection this week. Dropping down to our next tier right here. James Conner at 15 and Devon Achane, same matchup at 16. They're playing each other. James Conner he's just so good. I mean, this guy, he was responsible for winning the Arizona Cardinals that game against the Chargers this past week. James Conner is so consistent in that offense. The only thing that really affects James Conner's fantasy production is the workload that they give him on a consistent basis. Sometimes they have these games where they just are not in the game, and then he loses production as a result because they're not giving him the ball because they're trailing. That's the nature of this Cardinals offense. It's hot and cold. Now, with Tua coming back this week, it could totally flip the game script in Miami's favor. Now, the reason I have Achane still ranked below James Conner is because I just can't trust this Miami Dolphins team yet. Even if Tua does come back this week, I still don't know what to expect from this offense yet. I mean, they've looked so horrific over the last several weeks without Tua. It's like hard to see them just automatically flip a switch and they're all of a sudden super high upside again. So I've got Conner above Achane while acknowledging that both of these guys, very, very high upside. 17 and 18. J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Swift right here. J.K. Dobbins taking on the New Orleans Saints. I particularly really like this play right here. J.K. Dobbins obviously is not going to get looked at as positively this week because he had a good matchup versus the Cardinals and he blew it. Like, it wasn't very good. J.K. Dobbins couldn't get anything going on the ground. That offensive line is still a little bit weaker. They're still a little bit injured, but this New Orleans Saints defense, they're getting hammered over the last several weeks because Derek Carr's not there to balance out any kind of offense that they once had. So this offense is going to be just as bad as it was last week, if not potentially even worse, because this offense just stinks. And I think that's going to leave that New Orleans defense on the field a bunch, giving JK a bunch of opportunities, man. JK's capable of big plays. We saw it the first 2 weeks in particular. I don't worry about JK Dobbins' production in fantasy, especially this week against New Orleans. DeAndre Swift at number 18 at the Washington Commanders. I love the matchup here. I just can't trust yet what he's going to bring us on a weekly basis. I know. I probably am a little too skeptical on this one, but I just can't get on board. I can't get out of my mind what we saw from DeAndre Swift those first, 3 weeks in fantasy? Borderline droppable. Like, this guy was horrific in fantasy football for a while. So I get it. Great hot streak. He went on a great hot streak right before their bye week. Totally on board with it. And against the Commanders should actually be a really good matchup. So he's here at 18 to safeguard myself from a massive bust week from him. But obviously I acknowledge this guy has top 10 to top 7 upside this week. And then Alvin Kamara to round this tier out probably feels really, really low. And honestly, it hurts me to do this. He's at 19 here at the Los Angeles Chargers, not only because this matchup is really, really stiff, but number 2, I said this last week, they are riding him like a freaking horse. And look at the past 3 weeks for him in particular. Not been very good. Without Derek Carr, his upside just hasn't been as high. The only way he salvages upside is if he gets targets out of the backfield. And he just didn't get it last week. So Kamara just doesn't have the same upside that he did with Derek Carr. And it's become totally 100% provable at this point. So with Kamara, I'm ready to rank him back up there when Derek Carr comes back. But they're riding this guy like a horse. He's not young anymore. So it's like, it makes me fear that the wheels might come off at some point. Dropping down to our next tier. Tank Bigsby at number 20 and Josh Jacobs at 21. Now with Tank Bigsby here, obviously dependent on if Travis Etienne plays or not. Doug Peterson did come out and say this week, yeah, Travis Etienne's still our number 1 running back here. I don't blame him for saying that because I think it gives them trade leverage here. I am hoping that he gets traded or he doesn't play this week because Tank Bigsby has another really good opportunity versus the Green Bay Packers defense here. Not that the Packers defense is weak, they're really good. But the Tank Bigsby, I really like this situation here because this guy proved at this point that he can absolutely handle the number 1 workload. He's been really efficient when he's able to get more than 12 carries. So I really like Tank Bigsby once again if Travis Etienne doesn't go. And then with Josh Jacobs at 21 at the Jacksonville Jaguars here in the same matchup, I think he's shown signs of life the past 2 weeks. Very, very positive sign. but I still notice that Emmanuel Wilson is involved in this offense. Can't get that out of my head. So I do wonder what week it will be where there's still a little bit of a split. But obviously, this matchup is fantastic. Everybody's taking advantage of the Jags defense, except the New England Patriots this past week because, for obvious reasons, they're a disgrace. So Josh Jacobs, I think, has a lot of upside for more, but he's down here at 21. Javonte Williams at 22 and Chuba Hubbard at 23. Javonte Williams, Chuba Hubbard, same matchup here. It's in Denver this week. Definitely prefer Javonte over Chuba. The one thing I will say with this one, Javonte scares me because it reminds me of when Najee had the big game against the Raiders a couple weeks ago. Javonte Williams isn't actually handling too much of a workload. He's still only in on like 50-60% of snaps. And last week he had like 16 carries. This guy is not handling every carry for this backfield. Maybe that's a good thing. And I do think this week it will be successful again versus the Carolina Panthers because I think they're going to crush them. But I do worry about the long-term upside of Javonte Williams. But obviously with this week in particular, I think he's got a pretty safe floor and a relatively high ceiling against the Panthers. Chuba, this isn't the week to play him, man. It's just not. At the Denver Broncos, this is not a great matchup for Chuba Hubbard. I love him. I've been a big Chuba Hubbard guy since day one of 2024. But Chuba Hubbard this week, it's just not going to work out, I don't think. I think the Panthers are going to get... They're going to get whipped. I mean, they're going to get a butt whooping in this game. And I think that Chuba Hubbard is going to struggle to get anything going on the ground. It might look very similar to this New Orleans Saints game that they had in week 1, where Chuba just really struggles to get anything going. With that being said, he's been so good. So I can definitely see the propensity for a big play in this game, but Chuba Hubbard don't like this matchup at all. Do not let this matchup fool you. It's not good, and you don't want to start him over a lot of other good guys. Rachaad White at 24. Rounding out this tier versus the Atlanta Falcons here, Rachaad White, man, he came through. He came through in a big, big way in week 7. Now, here's the good thing with Rachaad White. Why I prefer him at this point, it's been a roller coaster with this Bucs backfield. I prefer him over Bucky Irving. Definitely over Sean Tucker at this point because he's getting the pass catching upside. And they need it now more than ever from the running back position because obviously Godwin's gone and Evans is gone for this week and the next several weeks in particular. Rachaad White versus the Atlanta Falcons, I believe has a lot of upside in this matchup from a pass catching standpoint because I do think Bucky Irving will be involved, which definitely lowers his ceiling in fantasy as a whole. Dropping down to our last tier right here. Brian Robinson Jr. I know, where did he go, right? Tony Pollard at 26 as well. Brian Robinson Jr., again, matchup isn't good. Number one. That's number one. Versus Chicago Bears, this is not a good matchup for Brian Robinson Jr. And in addition to this, Brian Robinson Jr., if you actually notice the last 2 games that he's played, he's been in on like 35-40% of the snaps. Now, he's been super efficient because their offense is running so well right now. But without Jaden Daniels in this game, he's not 100% healthy yet either. I don't love this matchup for Brian Robinson Jr. It's okay to acknowledge that Brian Robinson Jr. is not one of the elites yet, but he's definitely been very good. So he still remains in the top 30, but I don't think that this is a good week. Very similar to Chuba Hubbard this week. Tony Pollard at 26 against the Detroit Lions. Matchup stinks, man. This guy is really like relevant in fantasy because he's the only functional piece on that offense. Calvin Ridley's functional, but he's got a dysfunctional quarterback situation, making him dysfunctional. Tony Pollard luckily plays the running back position, and the quarterbacks are functional enough to throw to him. So Tony Pollard maintains upside because of pass catching, but this matchup against Detroit, this is not a good one right here. Ramondre Stevenson at 27 and Chase Brown at 28. I actually think Ramondre, decent shot of him having a bounce back week this week. Putting him down here because the Patriots look like a defeated team to me. Ramondre did not play particularly well in his return to action last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think that just Gerard Mayo calling this team soft is going to turn a lot of players off. So I think that the Patriots come out relatively, possibly low effort game in this week. But I do think that Ramondre, just based on what the Jets have been giving up on the ground, does have a decent shot for a decent game in this game. Chase Brown versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Matchup is not particularly great. I don't think it'll be as tough as it was versus the Browns. Chase Brown is obviously High upside because he's got like big playability in him, but you obviously have to safeguard yourself from the potential that he doesn't hit on a big play. Because he's like relatively inefficient on a per touch basis, but the big plays is what Chase Brown has been living off of the past several weeks. With Chase Brown, don't love the matchup. This team is definitely pass first, so he's down here at 28. And then to round it all out, Bucky Irving at 29, Nick Chubb at number 30. Bucky Irving versus the Atlanta Falcons. I think that Bucky Irving is, again, the guy that I want with the carries. He got just as many carries, again, as Rachaad White did in week 7, and he was better on a per touch basis. The only thing that Bucky Irving doesn't have over Rachaad White at this point is the receiving upside. Now, Bucky does have receiving upside, but not quite as much of it as Rachaad White, so that lowers his ceiling a little bit. So unless Bucky can get in the end zone or hit a couple big plays, he's going to be a worse play than Rachaad White this week. And then Nick Chubb at number 30 versus the Baltimore Ravens. Love the fact that he's been back. I love the fact that he came back, handled the majority of the workload. But let's address reality. He was not good on a per touch basis. He was like averaging like less than 3 yards per carry. That is so below Nick Chubb standards. Hopefully, he can get back to having like 3 yards per carry this week. It's going to be a progression, and this isn't a good matchup. But Nick Chubb just serving the backfield in that lead role makes me have him at number 30. And as I do at the end of every single ranking video, I give you my favorite underdog running back play of the week if you are getting into an underdog best ball draft this week. This week, I'm just going to take the shot. Tyler Algier at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As I was saying with Bijan, very uncertain about this guy still. I think he definitely could have a good week this week, but I also think that Tyler Algier may be in line to split the backfield again. I really do think that Tyler Algier will be a factor in this game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have nothing to back it up with numbers-wise. This is just a gut feeling that I have, so he is my underdog running back pick of the week. So let me know how your team is looking this week so far, and if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings for this week, click on this video right here.